Welcome to the Grappling Grappling Rewind Podcast.
Welcome to this week on the Grappling Rewind Podcast. In this week's show, we're going to recap the 2022 IBJJF GP that featured both women's and a men's GP for the first time ever. We are also going to preview Submission Only Series, the Emerald City Invitational 5, talk a little about Fight to Win 213, and Midwest Finishers 10. As always on the show, I'm your host, Maine, my co-host,
Austin.
How you doing, Austin?
I'm all right, man. How are you?
Doing good. So we're doing the show remote because we're both not feeling good, and so being safe and doing it this way. So if the audio takes a slight hit, that's what we're dealing with. Again, should be back in person next week, but just trying to be safe. Starting a new job soon for me, so I'm trying to not pass along or get sick and all that good stuff. So if it takes a hit, my apologies. We're doing the best that we can. But before we get into the recap, do we have any news this week? It's been a pretty quiet week. Kind of getting towards the holidays. Usually not a whole lot of stuff goes on. Other than sort of Nicholas Meregali going scorched earth on 50-50.
Yeah, this he kind of had a lot to say about this Grand Prix event that just happened. He was there coaching. Yeah, he was there coaching, I think, Ana Rodriguez, if I'm not mistaken. And it was pretty... He had a lot to say about 50-50. I don't know if you want to wait until we start talking about the matches.
I kind of want to wait, but that was kind of the biggest news this week. Oh, have we talked about... I think last week... I don't want to rehash this, but I think last week we talked about Gordon versus the Rotolo brothers as a match. I think that was on last week's show. Do you remember?
I don't remember if we talked about it last week.
Yeah. So regardless, Gordon is basically, they're trying to make that fight happen. They've continued to go back and forth. I haven't really read a ton into it. I wasn't super interested once I knew that there was some kind of hype being generated for the match. I'll be amped if the match gets made.
Sure.
It would be neat. In news, ONE FC announced Daniel Kelly is going to fight another Sambo practitioner for a women's belt at 115, I believe. And I'm not exactly sure who she is facing. She's going to face... she just listed as a decorated Sambo opponent.
Huh.
I think one announced it, but regardless, we saw Cade do very well. I'm very curious to see... I think the woman she's facing is much, much closer to her level. And it's not going to be Cade versus. So I'm very, very happy. It should be exciting. Daniel Kelly's put on exciting performances in ONE so far. So again, I appreciate that ONE is continuing to bring in a multitude of different sports and martial arts to face, some of the best jiu-jitsu grapplers in the world. So I don't think I have any other news, man. It's a pretty quiet week for news. Again, once we get kind of October, November, December, news tends to slow down a little bit. World Pros coming up in November. I don't think we have anything else major. Let's get right into the recap then.
Sure.
All right, where do you want to start with this one? Do you want to talk about the super fights first, or you want to talk about the bracket first? What do you want to do here?
Let's go in fight order. So let's go through the women's tournament first.
Let's do that.
So the first round of that.
That sounds great. So the first round we have. I'm gonna butcher her name, and I heard it a lot on the broadcast. I'm looking at it now. Janina.
I think it's Janaína.
Janaína Libre, and she defeats Lisa Montero via decision, and that's on points 8-6. Pretty high scoring match.
Yeah, this was another one of those 50-50 and 50-50 with a lapel sort of sweep battles. That's where a lot of the points came from. This might have been, I don't want to call it an error because, she's highly decorated. She's one of the best women of all time. But Louisa had this really cool knee bar attempt with about a minute and a half left. And she ends up getting an ad, but because she doesn't end up finishing the knee bar, Janaína gets the sweep points.
Yeah.
So it ends up being 8-6 in an ad. So it's now you're down by 2. All Janaína needs to do is hold on, and she wins.
Yeah,
and that's pretty much what happened. When it's a close match like that, when it's 6-6, I don't want to say you let it go to the ref decision, but if the choices are ref decision versus putting yourself in a bad spot that you could potentially get scored on, it might have not been the best tactic.
Yeah, it was an interesting. Tactically, it was interesting. I was kind of curious when I watched it as well. There were a few matches in this tournament that had that happen. And I'm not sure if I'm just seeing it more, or again, I've been doing this for enough years now that I've seen enough high-level jiu-jitsu that I'm picking up on it more. But watching some of the tactical decisions being made and being like, I've been in this tournament specifically, I was more surprised at some of the tactical decisions than I had been in the past in previous IBJJF GPs. And I remember always in the GPs, we always are kind of confused. Usually there's a tactical like, that's a weird way to play this in the IBJJF, but happens in the GPs. So Gina moves forward on that one. Next match, we had Ana Rodriguez defeating Maisa Bastos via points. So it was 4-0.
Yeah, this was, I think, they said this in the commentary too, but Maisa is pretty undersized. She's maybe like 20 pounds under.
Yeah, I think she was about 20 pounds under, if I recall. Wasn't
like one
Felipe
Andrew.
Like
the upper limit. Yeah, like 140 is like the upper limit. I think she's walks around like the 20s somewhere.
I think it was, I wrote it in the first section of notes I had. I think it was about 20 pounds. And again, what we talked about in the preview for this was like, that's historically Maisa's going into any other bracket but strawweight, is going to be undersized, and she's done okay up in the weight classes. But I think especially in the gi, more and more women are kind of figuring out her game, and B, figuring out how to leverage like the size against her to put that forward pressure into her. And they know like she plays a super, super sharp game at strawweight, but when she has to play against the bigger players that have a little more length to stop the sweep, to stop the bottom game, we've kind of seen her recently run into some problems with that, both at ADCC and here in the GP.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about giving up size, especially, you could just look by the numbers. Heavyweights tend to have, the heavier the weight tends to have more guard passing. So if you're a guard player playing in your weight class, like a smaller weight class, then you're going up, it's going to be more difficult for you to regard. Just to piggyback on what you were saying about forward pressure going against someone bigger, it's harder to do if you're trying to deal with somebody who's bigger than you. Playing a tight guard game for the entire match is increasingly difficult the bigger the people get. Right.
So Anna pulls immediately, and then Bastos gets swept to neutral in like a double suited open guard, and she's sort of just content to kind of sit there for a little bit.
Yeah, this is again part of that meta with like the trying to play 50-50 with the lapel. There's two kind of like just tech up sweeps, meaning like just come up to a combat base, score your points, and then let your opponent decide what they want to do. If they concede, then you start passing. But really, the whole meta seems to be in the gi to get to those like really strong guard positions that are hard to untangle yourself from, just to slow the whole game down. And then when you find a way to extract your leg, you extract your leg so that you can stand up. And that's what happened twice in both the sweeps that Anna had.
Yeah. Yeah, she's really like Bastos would commit to like a low side pant grip, and then Anna would sort of like yank that out and then take her over.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was that. Again, that was the whole match. It was interesting. There was a reset in here that I didn't really like. It was sort of, they were kind of going off bounds when they're doing sort of a back take and a forced turtle, and they just reset to standing. After watching so much ADCC, it's so weird to like it. Certain matches in this tournament, and IBJJF has very specific rules on like what is a neutral restart, what is a position restart, when you pull them back. But it's so weird to me that like in certain like very, very recreatable positions to go off the mat, they elect to restart them standing. It's such a weird thing.
Yeah, and this will get into like, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole talking about IBJJF rules, but the boundary rules for IBJJF have always been odd to me.
They've tried to improve them.
Yeah, I think the intent is good. Like, you don't want people fleeing the mat to avoid getting scored on or losing. But also, it kind of makes this weird kind of like a gray area where somebody knows there's going to be a reset, so they just have to modify the position somewhat. And at this high level of like athlete, they know how to manipulate those kinds of things. Yeah. So sometimes you see the rules where someone's kind of being forced out. They'll kind of like move themselves backwards towards the edge just to try to, I don't want to call it stalling, but it's like, well, hey, I'm almost in a single leg. Yeah. I'm almost in this spot. It's like they can sense when the grappling exchange is not going their way, and they kind of move themselves towards the edge of the mat before it gets too bad.
Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of...
We saw a lot of... I think I can point to 3 different matches in this tournament where we saw that, or actually probably 4 matches of the 11 in the tournament where it's like, oh yeah, that guy is actively using the edge of the mat as a tool to not get scored on or to prevent score. And
it's 100% part of the sport for IBJJF. It's using the rules of the edge to win and to play the game.
And they've done a little better with it, but I still think it's really hard to watch. Again, the GP, we talk about it always. Every year we cover the GP. It's one of the hardest events pacing-wise to cover. I think the whole video for this is like 4.5 hours long for 11 matches. I think the matches start about 30 minutes, and there's about 30 minutes of interviews and dead air at the end. So it's a 3.5 hour event end to end for 11 matches. Like it, and there's subs in there, and some are quick subs.
Yeah,
man, the pacing is every year is rough. At least they didn't have a 2-hour intermission between the semis and the finals like they did a couple years ago. So moving on to the third place match. Before we, complain too much about IBJJF, Luisa Montero defeats Maisa Bastos via. This was 2-2 points, and there was one advantage here.
Yeah. So there's a really cool near guard pass and back take that put Luisa up by an ad. It's kind of like a single arm leg drag attempt that ends up kind of seeing her in turtle, where she almost like takes her back.
Yeah.
So that was like the biggest exchange, I thought.
They don't give an advantage for that, which I thought was really weird.
I put Luisa up by an ad.
Oh, they did give an advantage. In my notes, I said there's no advantage. It's a travesty.
Yeah, I think that's the only time she scored an ad, and then Maisa had a ton of like kind of like K guard back take setups, but Luisa does this really good job of like stacking and then also stapling the legs with her legs, so she can't invert all the way, if that makes sense. So like if you're trying to invert your knee to get it to the mat to do like a K guard back take, she does a good job of cutting around the corner and then stapling your leg to the mat with her legs. That way you can't really do anything, and if you do keep inverting, you're going to end up like leg dragging yourself.
Right. Yeah, it was a really interesting, and she sat there for a while, and I would say at some point she was stalling there, kind of waiting for like, hey, you have to move here. I am on the onus is on you here to move. And it was used tactically. Luisa Montero takes that one points, and she wins third place for the IBJJF GP.
Yep.
So about the finals, Jaina Libre defeats Ana Rodriguez via. I keep saying my notes say decision, but it's 0.60.
Yeah. Yeah, so the biggest action in this was kind of right off the rip, the start of the match.
Does it say off the rip in your notes too?
No, it's just how I talk.
Two matches ago, in the Ana Rodriguez match, my first note is off the rip. And it's not the off rip. I don't use it very often, but it's just very funny that you said it. I've not included it in my notes before, but yeah, off rip. Sorry, did I cut you off?
Yeah, no worries. Anna pulls, and there's a really close knee cut pass that puts Anna in turtle. That allows Janaina to find the back for 4 points in an ad. Really? The ad coming from the near guard pass, and then the 4 points I was from taking the back.
Really, really nice sequence too. It's just like he just times the knee cut perfectly to come on the outside of it and just swing in the back. And then Anna does a really good job of like standing up out of it and trying to like shuck off the side. But Jana does a great job kind of getting double underhooks and like really kind of cementing herself to the back enough to score the points. She kind of starts to work up, but pretty quickly realizes that like it's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's really cool to see somebody. And this is kind of a note I had for like the women's tournament in general. It's really cool to see like such big names, and then there's still up and comers who are able to beat them. Yeah. Like Janaina, I mean, she won brown belt worlds, I think, but other than that, I don't think she's like a huge name yet. But this is like could be part of her coming out party to like, hey, I'm on this world stage.
I mean, I hope, because brown belt worlds has always sort of been, it's always, especially in the women's divisions, it's always like there's a bigger jump between, historically, there's been a bigger jump between the brown belt women and then the black belt women. Like, we've seen a lot of women do very, very well at blue, purple, brown, get to black, and have a couple of years of, like, really hard on-ramping, where they're not winning versus the best in the world. It's really nice to see her kind of make that jump and, immediately contend with the best in the world. We've seen it. It's kind of how it used to be in the men's weight classes a couple of years ago. And we've seen now many, many brown belts, come in, world brown belt killers, and then come in and immediately either win a black belt world title or like do very, very well.
Sure.
And so we're starting to see that sort of maybe mirrored where historically we haven't seen it as much for the women. So really, really cool.
Yeah, I think that might also be just one last point on that. I think that also might be a function of super fights. So for women, there's typically not the same pool of black belts that there are for men.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know, it's not uncommon that you'll see a purple belt or a brown belt versus a black belt in like a super fight for women, especially nogi. So it's like, I think as that level starts to sort of close in on itself a little more, where it's just like an advanced division versus just like everything dictated by belt hierarchy, I think that kind of evens the playing field. Same thing with men. That's kind of happened as well. We saw like some fight to win events where there'd be a brown belt going against a black belt, or you'd see like, just two highly touted.
I mean, every single nogi tournament ever.
Exactly. Yeah. No one really cares about belt as much. It's more like, are you on the level or not? And as that kind of happens, I think you're kind of seeing this like playing field kind of merge a little bit.
It's been really interesting, kind of in the 5 years we've been doing the show, to watch that change, because even when we started doing the show, it was still kind of a little bit of a big deal to have like colored belts in black belt nogi tournaments, and we have watched that. Like, that is not even a talking point anymore on the show, and like bring it up. Oh, he's a brown belt. Like, yeah, but he's in the black belt. He's in the tournament. Like, I don't care what belt he is. It's just how, like Nick Rodriguez,
sure,
ADCC. It's like we kind of in nogi have very much moved away competitively from like caring about someone's belt, and in gi that's still very much a thing. But even then, we're seeing it diminish because there's less of a stigma against going against a lower belt as a black belt. So just interesting shifts in the community overall.
Yep.
50-50 foot sweep here that doesn't score kind of late in the match. And then the match sort of like goes through where there's about, I think, a minute and a half left, minute 22 left in the match. And Anna is down 4 points at this point. And she goes, fuck it. And it looks like Jaina is kind of in the process of starting like a kick sweep or like a variation of like a single ankle sweep. And Anna grabs the foot, kind of like an ankle lock, sits back on it, and kind of goes to the ankle lock. And then Jaina immediately stands up and then gets 2 more points. And so tactically, it was an interesting decision. It's like, hey, there's a minute and a half. You're not getting around her guard.
Yeah, and even if you do, it's only 3 points.
Right, and then so you're going to have to make something else happen. It was interesting to see it happen a minute and a half in. I think that's honestly tactically probably where you would want to do it. It's just,
you'd have to try for a sub for sure.
Yeah, it is something we don't see as commonly as I would expect. Mm-hmm. Really.
Also to that point, I think so earlier in the match before that happened, Anna had a near guard pass where Janaina had her foot in the lapel, kind of like behind her back, and then she ended up getting both feet behind the lapel. And for all intents and purposes, she passed almost all the way to north-south, save for that foot in the lapel. And I think she was able to recover her guard from that. Anna gets an ad out of it. But, I think if you try that hard to pass someone's guard, that's probably like your best and final effort to passing someone's guard. You realize you can't, and then it's like, okay, I have a minute and a half left to do something. I have to score at least 5 points. The chances of her taking her back or mounting her pretty low after passing her guard, just time-wise. So, again, like you said, tactically, that's probably the time you try to spam a footlock or some sort of submission.
Or at least you get the guard opened up. Like, hey, maybe you can re-sweep into a pass versus just trying to statically pass. And again, it was just an interesting tactical decision. It didn't end up working out. But again, one of the things I like highlighting on this show when we talk about it is like interesting tactical decisions like that in matches. And this one, again, is like, when do you make that call for, I need to make something else happen, fuck it, go for a footlock. You know, it's like, do you make it at 2 minutes? Do you make it at a minute? Do you make it at 30 seconds? It's always interesting when high-level competitors decide to make, if they are going to make that decision, decide to make it during a match.
Yeah, for sure.
So Libre takes that and now becomes the first women's lightweight Grand Prix champion. That's awesome. Again, we've kind of talked that, it was unfortunate that IBJJF wasn't doing more women's GP events. So it's awesome for them to listen and to begin putting women on the same stage as the men for these big pro events. They don't run very many of them. So again, I do appreciate them giving the women in the sport also a spotlight, also, money for winning a tournament.
Sure.
It's a step in the right direction, and love to see it. Any kind of closing thoughts on women's divisions?
Not that I can think of. It was a cool tournament to watch.
Yeah, it's fun. Moving on. Do you want to do men's or you want to do the super fights?
Let's do men's and then the super fights.
Cool. First round of the men's medium heavy GP. All the guys weighed about 195-ish.
Yeah, this was the medium heavy, right? Medium heavy.
I think so. I
GP,
forget what the actual cutoff is for medium heavy, but they were all around about 195-ish. And all of them weighed in, all of them made weight. I did like that Flo posted that beforehand, the day before, of like, hey, and it was like a super cut of like made weight. And it just was nice to have a little piece of news like that come across my feed with Kendall kind of announcing all the weights. And it was like, oh yeah, that's cool. Like they did a weigh-in the day before, and so I know all the guys made weight. Now there's going to be, there's no weirdness going into the bracket. It just made it feel more professional, and I really like that, along with the press conference that they did as well. Mito Hebamar defeats Rolando Jr. On points. This was really, this is a lot of on the feet. The men's tournament, I think, had much more time spent by all the athletes on the feet. For better or for worse, we can talk about how the IBJJF scores that. Rolando then throws, I think he throws two of them in this, like a variation of a Tominagi. And it's something we've seen him kind of go to the well with before. But he gets an advantage for the first time when he throws it.
Yeah, he got really close to finishing it. He's able to drop Heba to his hip, but then Hebamar kind of makes that into a scramble where they're both kind of just regripping each other and standing back up. So yeah, Ronaldo gets the ad, but really, I thought really good heads up by Heba to not concede the takedown off of it.
Yeah, it was good. It's also because Ronaldo throws it so quickly into guys, and he tends to kick you, like literally kick you up when he does it and over. He does it like almost like a balloon sweep, or it's literally a Tominagi. That's historically it's an overhead sweep, but he actually does it. Some guys will throw it like Yoko Tominagi, like to the side, but he throws it straight overhead, and he'll mount guys off of that, not infrequently. So Hibamar gets kind of the jump on that. Late in the match, Hibamar shoots a single that he kind of turns into a double, and then Rolando runs off the mat. Again, the edge of the mat play is something that we see all the time in IBJJF, very frequently. It's par for the course. They've done a lot to fix it, but this was very clearly like Ronaldo going off the edge to avoid that sequence. And it's, again, it's not my favorite thing to see.
So it ends up being two ads out of that because it's one for the single leg attempt and then another for the back tick attempt.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I don't know. In a match that tightly contested, I mean, I know you have to play by the rules, but it seems like such a big thing to give two ads for when it seems like to me the same sequence of things.
Yeah.
Which I know you can't kind of modify the rules in the moment, but thinking of it,
it's a point stack.
Setting.
You don't like point stacking, which is funny.
I don't.
I don't
if nothing changes, if that makes sense. Like if you're already dominating with the same thing, I don't know.
So
I guess I don't like point stacking. I never thought about it.
I pull behind the curtain. Austin and I have had probably an hour and a half talk on the ADCC rules for point stacking, and I think we sit very firmly in two separate camps on it. But again,
mostly one rule. But yeah, for sure.
Yeah. You want to hear about that? DMS or follow us at Grappling Rewind, and you can get the uncut version of just us talking rules nuances. This was another IBJJF particularity where they restart this takedown sequence in the turtle. Like they don't start him standing up. And again, I need to refresh my knowledge of the IBJJF rules.
I think they restart him standing, but just immediately gets to turtle because it's like, I don't know. Heba has body lock grips, so it's like it's not going to be smart to stay standing for Ronaldo. It's going to be because it's going to be easy like mat return. If he doesn't, he has his legs. He has one leg in the middle of both of his legs.
You just lift and turn, and you're on the mat again.
Yeah, Ronaldo had a grip in between his own legs, grabbing the middle leg of Hebamar, if that makes sense. And it's like, well, yeah, man, but that's not going to stop him from, like, if he explosively goes, like, you're going to get mat returned.
Yeah, and especially because Junior is so historically such an explosive dude. Like, very few people can stop. That's one of the things he is known for in his game.
Mm-hmm. So it ends up being two ads to one. I think we covered most of like the action that happened. It was those couple of Tomo attempts
Yeah.
from Ronaldo.
And that was it. I mean, that was it. There was a lack of activity for big stretches of this match, unfortunately. But again, Hibamara takes that, moves on. Next match, we had Azaki Bahents defeating Andre Porfirio via submission. A Kimura about 8 minutes in.
Yeah, this was probably, I don't know, maybe my favorite match to watch. There's a beautiful inside trip that scored Azaki 2 in the beginning of the match, and then after a really long pressure passing battle, saw a lot of reguarding from Porfirio, a lot of really good guard play. Masaki finally scores the 3. He had a super long pressuring battle. I thought that was really cool to watch.
The whole sequence to watch the regripping from Andre, and then kind of the just continued pressure from Bahents just coming forward, like essentially through the grips.
Mm-hmm.
Like he kind of like Andre did an amazing job. I think this whole sequence is probably like 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah,
of just like essentially Andre retaining guard and Azaki just going, I'm gonna get through eventually. Does some great foot movement, and this was a masterclass of like grindy through the grips guard passing. This is how I like to pass too. So I'm gonna go back and watch this and take probably some more notes for my own game, because he doesn't spend a lot of time breaking the grips of Andre. He kind of like lets Andre go and you're cool. I'm just gonna work around those grips and like work your hands down, get my knees over top. I'm gonna drop my legs through halfway through, open your legs with my knees and feet. It was a really, really neat pass. And then he gets the top. He kind of gets a like a topside crucifix, like a leg staple for a little bit there.
He pins his inside arm. It makes the Kimura happen easier. So if you can shin pin the bicep of the inside arm of your partner, or the near side arm, however you want to look at it, it makes the Kimura easier to pull off, because they can't grip their hands together to defend against it.
This is always how I teach when guys pass. If like you ever have a chance to staple the arm when you pass, do it. And he may be able to do it here. I don't remember exactly the finishing sequence, but it may be because, and I tend to like to staple a lot, because Andre retains the grips. So you're continuing to grip and trying to pass, so your hands are committed, and you can get your knees over top of the arms and staple there, and then disincentivize that grip, and eventually the grip is let go, because it's usually your own gi or their gi, and then you're in a staple. And so it's really neat to see that being used at the high level. Yeah,
I'm not like a big stapler from, like, I don't usually play like crucifix or topside crucifix from side control, but I know there's a lot of high level guys that do. I think Junior Ocasio is a guy who's a really good series from that spot.
Yep.
He's obviously not in this tournament, but just as like another touch point.
I think Galvao plays a little of that too. Like I can see it. Galvao does. We're seeing it kind of come back in the gi and in no gi, and I'm very, very happy. As a guy who spends a lot of time in that position myself, it is really cool to get a lot of new tape study and footage on like the current high level guys using stuff that I like to use, and it's like, oh cool, that's how that needs to get done at a high level, and it's just very interesting. The Kimura is pretty simple. It's the step over the head Kimura, kind of you sit on them, and then he rips it up. I was really surprised he was able to rip this grip out as effectively as he was.
Yeah, that was impressive. You don't see a lot of Kimuras at the super high level anymore, which it's one of my favorite submissions, so I really like being able to see that. I thought this was kind of like, this is what I was going to say earlier, this is kind of like the epitome of what Jiu-Jitsu is. It's like a takedown, a pressuring battle against a good guard, eventually a pass or a sweep. Obviously this time he went the side of passing. Bahents finally breaks through and finds the Kimura. It's like, that's what we're looking for, right? It's like takedown to a guard pass, to a dominant position, to a submission. That's like,
hey man,
what
not a whole lot else going on. You're gonna go forward, and then like you're gonna sub, and then go about your day.
That's what classic jiu-jitsu is.
Yep, great match. Again, the grip pull off was really interesting, because I don't know how strong Bahents is, but I assume he's a human tank, because Andre has the grip on his own pant leg, and then Bahents just like kind of rips it off. And he didn't do anything like weird. He didn't like address the hand. He just kind of like figure fours it, and it doesn't even look super, super tight to the chest. He kind of just turns it and rips it off behind. It was a really interesting like lack of grip break that just worked. So I'm very curious exactly kind of what was done in that moment to be able to break that grip, because he just kind of rips it off. So that was neat to see.
Yeah, for sure.
Third place match. Ronaldo Jr. defeats Andre Porfirio via submission. Really, really late in the match. Like, 15 or so seconds left in the match?
Yeah, there's really short time left. So again, we saw this is kind of interesting. I thought it was interesting to see Ronaldo pull. It's not a thing we see a ton of from him. He usually tries to play top game. So it's interesting that he kind of pulled. He tried to get close guard, but he ends up with like a spider and lapel lasso.
Yeah. When he does pull, this is kind of what he likes to pull. He likes to pull to more of like a long range lapel guard on guys. When his feet were all taped up a couple of years ago, this is the kind of style of guard that he would elect to play when he did that.
Mm-hmm. So he uses that to eventually end up sweeping. That gets him like, just another one of these like kind of stand up grips. Once I have your leg and you don't have my leg, I can kind of disengage. And then it kind of became this battle of can Porfirio keep contact, like kind of tangle him with whatever guard he has as much as possible, or can Ronaldo kind of break contact and use some of the long-range passing that he's known for, this super dynamic, super explosive sort of passing that kind of really sees him have success at the high level. So eventually, Ronaldo kind of breaks through. He gets him to a turtle, and then he stands in neutral, which gives him a single leg. That single leg takedown scores, and then he eventually ends up trying to invert, but he ends up stapling his leg. So as he's kind of put down to the mat, Porfirio tries to invert. Ronaldo staples that leg with his leg. Kind of the same thing we saw in one of the Misa matches.
Yeah, really, really similar sequence.
Yep, and then that same sequence let him get like a low pant and waistband grip, which lets him do like the most insane leg drag I've seen in a long time. And then that leg drag ends up getting him on the back. He ends up trapping the arm through that back take.
That back take with the arm trap was the wildest shit I've seen in a while because, from that grip, he drags, and then he's very long-limbed in general, but when he gets the back, he kind of gets it with not really a body triangle, but it's very, very close to a body triangle. It's not hooks.
Yeah, it's a triangle over top of the over top of the arm.
But he throws it in like one motion, is able to trap that arm, like while getting the back at the same time. It was a wild sequence, and it's not something I don't remember the last time I've seen someone off a drag like that be able to trap the arm while getting the back.
Yeah, it was really impressive.
Yeah.
But I feel like, and they kind of talked about this in the commentary a bit, that like for as explosive as he is, he has a lot of precision. So it's really like he's just doing things faster than other people can do them, but he's just as precise as some of the same high-level guys that move slower.
Yeah. I
think they called him like Kendall kept calling it like NASCAR or something like that, where it's like he has better reaction time than some people. He's able to move faster, doing the same sequences other people have to do slower, just as a function of, athleticism.
Just his skills. Yeah, it's why he's always fun to watch for sequences like this, like the dynamic judo and throws, and then the just the amount of ground he will take in sequences is pretty unique. There's not a lot of guys, even at the high level, that are able to like take this much ground. So once he has the arm trapped, he can continue to work. I thought he was going to like fist and neck him for a while with that grip he had, because he was kind of driving his knuckles under the neck. Eventually, he kind of gets the grip he wants, and then he just turns the ankle, cuts aside, lifts the leg over the shoulder, and like a pretty traditional bow and arrow choke. It might have been like a collar slide up with the hand grip.
Yeah, it was definitely like a slide choke.
Yeah.
Just I don't know. I just typically call bow and arrow when you get under the leg. I could consider that bow and arrow, but then slide choke if you're on like double lapels. Or I don't know. I've heard people call it different things: zipper choke, cross collar from the back, whatever you want to call it.
Yep. I know. I know this is a slide
kind of
choke
from the back.
Yeah, a zipper choke or a slide choke.
Yeah.
A zipper choke if you like bring the handle way up. A slide choke, I don't know. They
seem to be the same thing to me.
Yeah,
but
they kind of are the same thing. And now I'm thinking about it and trying to like make an argument for one or the other. Yeah, they're kind of the same thing.
It's the double collar choke from the back.
Yep. So that's the third place match. Under the finals match, we had Azaki Bahens defeating Manuel Hibamar by adds 2-0. This was Bahens kind of coming forward with pressure, and for the first couple of minutes of the match, like I think almost half the match at least, it's just Zach pushing Hibamar out of bounds, Hibamar out of bounds, and it's not like aggressive like push out rules like for wrestling, but it's definitely like Hibamar being willing to play kind of on the edge, and then Behance just continuing pushing pressure, and eventually Hibamar kind of going out of bounds. And it happens like repeatedly throughout this match.
Yeah, they ended up getting Hibamar a stalling call like pretty early on in the match for kind of consistently going out of bounds and being on the person backing up.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it was midway through the match. I don't think it was early. I think it was like about halfway through or so in the match. Because again, it's one of my gripes with the IBJJF is like stuff like that. Like they're really, really slow to call passivity and inactivity, and like that 10-minute match, they really want you to have to do something egregious to get negatives called for you. And I think it makes it really hard to watch. And so for this, it was like half the match of like kind of that happening. And Hibamar was, again, nothing against Hibamar. He was playing like in the rules and how, you have a lot of time before you're going to get called. But a lot of time went by before there was a call. Eventually there was a call.
Yeah. And so then Hibamar ends up pulling close guard and then ends up tearing Asaki's pants.
Yeah, so I watched this and I was trying to figure out what was happening. I was like, why did they stop? And I was like, what? And then they gave a slow-mo replay. And I went, well, that is an angle to choose. Thanks, Flo.
Yeah, it tore right up like the backside of his leg, like up to his butt crack. So pretty interesting to replay that just to show it. But I also thought it was interesting, I don't know, just watching the stand-up war between them. I was kind of, you had some time to kind of overanalyze the match and the competitors and stuff. And I was like, man, Asaki probably has the tightest gi of all time on right now. Like, his pants look like skinny jeans, and his top kind of like just barely covered his waist. Like, it fit, but it fit. You know what I mean? Like,
it's like, hey man,
it was probably within the rules, but like just barely.
This is an IBJJF Pro event. They're probably gonna like, you're invited here. You're probably gonna get a little leniency for your gis. Yeah.
So apparently he got a Rodrigo Lopez's gi bottoms. The guy who fights Tyne in the super fight, he like goes off to the side and grabs his gi pants and continues the match.
I love that. So that happens. That happened occasionally. Weird aside here. In IBJJF for adult finals for Worlds for gi, you have to have a blue gi and a white gi, or I think you can have a black gi, but you cannot have two people with the same color gi in the finals of Worlds. So a couple of years ago, I think it was Talita Alankar, didn't have a white gi, and she only had a blue gi or something like that. So she had to borrow, I think it was Kako Yuasa's gi. And you can see, like, the name is wrong on the back because it's another woman's gi during a World Finals match. And I'm like, that's such a weird moment. I think it was Kako Yuasa, she did the gi. But it was such a weird, like, oh yeah, she had to go get another gi. Again, I was going somewhere with this, but it's just interesting. IBJJF is sometimes stickler for it, other times less of a stickler for it.
Yeah, I think at a high level, they're a little more lenient with their high level people than they are with like, the no name people. But,
yeah, I mean, or you get a checker or a ref that doesn't know the rules, and then you get what happened with some of our teammates where at Pans you had a referee that was telling that they couldn't wear a thing when they already had it approved, and then we checked and emailed the IBJJF, and everybody was like, yeah, that's fine. I don't know why he was telling me that. I'm like, cool, man. Love the consistency. Love how you treat the athletes.
It's like even if like you get some validation after the fact, it's like, well, in the tournament it still causes some like some panic, some they still had to get a new
rash guard during the tournament after matches. Like sucks. But we're gonna get into IBJJF a little later.
Yeah. So the biggest thing, going back to the match, the biggest thing I saw technique wise, Asaki kind of did this really good job of disengaging the 50-50, which is what Hiba kind of wanted to get to.
Yeah. Very much on the bottom.
And then he ended up forcing a turtle for an ad that got like kind of the first, the kind of one of the bigger scores of the match, considering that they both kind of had some penalties for stalling.
Yeah.
And then towards the end, Saki's up by an ad, so it's one ad and a penalty to one penalty.
Yeah.
And then Asaki counters Hiba's sweep attempt. He gets a near pass and he maintains the top position. What was really interesting about this is kind of one of Hiba's like 50-50 go-to sweeps where he kind of inverts, tries to take the leg with him, and then he'll either come up or he'll knee bar you if you don't react. But for Asaki to kind of counter this with very little time left when all he really had to do was just maintain and he won, I thought that was really heads up by him.
He counters it with essentially like a double leg.
Yeah.
and then like swings behind during the sequence. It was a pretty wild, like if you watch anything in this tournament, watch Tyne and Dapper's match, and then also watch this sequence from the finals, because it was a pretty it was really interesting. Basically, it was a counter from a double come up essentially, and then Behance just sort of wrestles his way behind Hibamar for the second ad to secure the match.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, great technique, and again, it's kind of why, like, one of the few times wrestling from your knees is ever like a real technique is like matches like this. Occasionally, like people say, "Oh, you should never knee wrestle." It's like you should never like intentionally knee wrestle. But it should absolutely be a thing that you see occasionally so that you know how to do it. Because in matches like this, again, Behance gets around from a knee wrestle double, essentially. So that was the match. Behance wins the IBJJF Medium Heavyweight Grand Prix. Congrats to him. Any other kind of thoughts on the tournament matches?
Not really. I think we'll talk about Nicholas Meregali after we talk about all of the matches in the.
Okay, so we'll do the Jonathan Alves Mateus Luna match last then. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Felipe Andrew versus Roosevelt Souza, and then we'll talk about the hotness that is Tyne Dapper and Rodrigo Lopez. This had, I think, the biggest weight discrepancy of any match, where Felipe Andrew, I think, was outsized by Roosevelt by, was it like 50 pounds?
Yeah, almost 50 pounds. I think he's like 213 or something around that. And then Souza's like close. He has to be like 260.
I think.
254. Yeah, so like 40 something pounds.
Yeah. And it looked like it.
Yeah.
I was surprised. Like, Felipe Andrew is like, he's not always the biggest guy, but it is very interesting to see, like, in a super fight match when there is a pretty substantial weight disparity. And it definitely affected how Felipe had to play this. Like, he had to play this as the smaller guy.
Yeah. I think he did a really good job of it.
Oh, yeah.
Souza was playing bottom, and he found like a footlock that allowed him to come up for two.
Yep. He was playing like a modified version. It's that X guard that we don't have a name for yet. That we need to have a name for. It's like the modified where you have it under, but you have the center leg inside of your leg, and it's actually on the outside leg. He played that, and there was a couple of times that he would play it, and he would play it also from the same side leg, whereas both feet on top of the inside of the thigh to push away. It's really interesting. It's something we're seeing more and more frequently at the high level. And Zach and I were talking a couple weeks ago, maybe on air, maybe off air, about like, is there a specific name for that position? Because it's not really single leg X, it's not really X guard, it's not really like De La Hiva, and it's this different guard that we're seeing now. If anyone does know the name of it, shoot me a DM, because I'm very curious. Because we don't have a name for it on the show. We've come up with names for stuff in the past, like double seated open guard. But yeah, he's playing a lot more of that modified X, single leg X, and that is sort of what he gets his initial series of points with, is that, and then later in the match, Roosevelt Souza tries a tornado sweep, and Felipe just takes the match from there.
Yeah, he found his way to his back off this kind of like backdoor sweep, and that allowed him to jump on the back, score a quick 4. Immediately, Souza escapes to close guard top, but 4 points is such a huge deficit. I think he's down 2 now, so it's 2-4.
Yeah.
And then Felipe sweeps by wrestling up from a lapel guard. He finds his back, and then that kind of led to the cross collar strangle from the back. Similar finish to what Ronaldo had as well.
It's a modified bow and arrow collar choke.
Yeah.
It was definitely a little more traditional, I think, than the slide choke variation that Ronaldo hit. But once he gets there, he didn't want to lose the back again by having Souza rotate back to the guard. So he grabs the grips, and then kind of very quickly, I think he's up 10-2 during the finish. So it was nice. Again, I like guys actively working towards a finish when they're up on points, because they don't
100%.
have to. And so even 8:15 in the match, we had only 1 minute and 45 seconds left. I appreciate when guys, lay it out. Felipe Andrew's been good for that.
For sure.
Yep. So let's talk about what was a very one-sided match, but still, just I've been studying kind of off the show a lot of Tyne Dapper's passing, because I really like how he passes. I think he's one of the most dynamic passes kind of the current generation. The way that he deals with a lot of the lapel guards and stuff is kind of very different than a lot of his contemporaries, and the way that he uses off timing and like in and out movement, I think is really interesting. And it's exciting to watch. Like, he's not a guy like pressure passing is great. I like pressure passing. I like certain pressure passers, but Tynan is a guy that he really mixes between about 4 different passes, and he's so good at it. And that is kind of what's on display here. He just continues to come around and pin, and then Tynan just keeps collapsing the legs in and just stepping around the legs. He goes from like the leg weave to the drag, then outside of the hips, and it is just a passing clinic if you want to watch like how Daupra passes through like a long range guard.
Yeah, I think the best way to like categorize his passing is like multi-directional passing.
Yeah.
And then like maybe the best use of shin pinning or stapling that anybody has in jiu-jitsu currently. I don't think there's anybody who shin pins better than him at the moment.
I don't think the shin pin. I think leg pinning Rotolos may have him beat for like leg pin passing, but as far as shin pin passing, like with your own shin there, I cannot point to another passer who does that better than Daupra.
Yeah, so like just to make, I don't know, immediately Lopez pulls, which I think is a very interesting tactical decision, knowing that Tynan is so good at passing and playing top game. So he immediately pulls, and then Tynan racks up 3 ads before he takes his back, which is like those ads. Any one of those ads could have been a pass, and I'm not saying that. Obviously, you consider them all near pass attempts, but to score 3 ads that quickly, it's almost like the ref recognizes how good Tynan is. Like, you could have passed any one of those 3 times. It's almost like he chose not to until he could take the back.
Yeah, he was definitely looking. He definitely, like, Lopez did a great job of like getting back to his guard, but it was very much like Tynan sort of choosing to not finish the pass until he got to the position that like he really had the hip settled. So sometimes you can pass the guard and you're not like, you're through the guard, but you're still like having this fight for like top position and like maybe there's a regard.
Sure. A lot of the meta is like passing to north-south now instead of side control. And Tynan looked like he wasn't content unless he took the back, which was, I mean, that's like levels above north-south, obviously.
Yeah. He got knee on belly points, I think, for a second. And then
he might have, yeah.
And then he moves to the cross side arm. And then I thought he was going to go actually straight arm here. He sets it up like a straight arm bar from the top side with the staple, and then he just beautifully lifts the arm up, spins behind it, and finishes just a top side belly up arm bar.
Yeah, the arm bar you're talking about, I've heard called reverse arm bar.
Yeah,
you're kind of doing like almost like a violin, like your belly is facing their elbow ditch. That makes sense.
I call it a violin from the top because I mean any arm bar where you have
similar mechanism, similar braking mechanism to the violin. I haven't called it a violin from that spot, but it's a similar braking mechanism.
Yeah.
But instead of finishing that way, he, like you said, he does like a switch, like a hip switch, that ends him up in a position I've heard called a quarter armbar, kind of like that judo armbar finish where your shin is under the armpit and your top side leg is across their face, and then he ends up finishing that armbar. That was really slick. There's one other technical spot that I thought was really cool. This is right after Tynan gets the back take points. Lopez escapes the back, and then Tynan gets to a De La Hiva, which allows him to, he has De La Hiva with a cross-side collar grip. He ends up putting Lopez on his far hip, like sitting him down to his hip. So he ends up getting the 2 there by teching up, and then he immediately goes right into a long step pass, which is just like, man, and if those 3 ads he earlier got out of passing, none of them were a long step. So it's like, hey, man, here's this other guard pass that I can do that's just as good as my other guard passing.
He tends to throw the long step the most infrequently of the 3 other passing options that he has. So I watched somebody, I'm forgetting who, somebody on Reddit posted, they made basically a big guard study of his passing and basically went through like, he uses this pass, he does it here. And it was a really in-depth, like very quick, like 5 or 6 minute study or 8 minute study of like, here are the passes that Tynan Daupra does, here is how he does them, here is why he does them, here are specific opponents he does them on when they have these certain grips. And it was like, oh, that's like super enlightening. Someone did the work for me, and the long step was the one that like cropped up the least frequently when I went back and watched some of his matches after watching that guard study. Was like, oh, he does that like very, very situationally, but doesn't prefer that pass.
Yeah, it was slick though, just to see like, I don't know, a sequence go off that prettily. Like, okay, here's the grips I want, here's the sweep, here's the pass. Now I'm going to the back again. It's
he gets an armbar when he's up 14-0.
Yeah.
Was when he got the finish. He got the armbar in 14:22. Or sorry, 4:22. So less than halfway through regulation, racked up 14 points and then gets the armbar. So that's
Yeah.
Again,
correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Lopez was a replacement for Jones-Leary. Am I correct in saying that?
I think that's correct. I think
So
the original one was
talking about.
Jones-Leary.
Yeah, I think that's what Tynan was talking about in the post-fight, that he'd like to have that match with Jones-Leary, not necessarily because of any animosity, but just because that's the match he would have missed out on. And then he thanked Rodrigo pretty quickly after that, so it seemed like he was a late replacement for Levi Jones-Leary.
Yeah, that'd be a fun match. Have they not fought each other before?
I'm terrible at that. You know, Josh is probably the best person.
Yeah, me and Josh are the two dudes nowadays that are just like, no, that was this match. So I don't think they faced each other before. Definitely not recently.
I think it'd be really interesting to see. Levi Jones-Leary has some of the most creative guard play that we've seen.
Absolutely.
So it'd be really interesting to see him against like probably the best middle to middle heavy guard passer in the game right now.
Yeah, I think the dynamics of that match are one I would definitely want to see, because it's just like, like you said, Levi Jones-Leary has the crazy guard, probably the best Berimbolo in the world, and then you have Tynan Dalpra, AJ Camp, probably the best passer right now at that weight in the gi in the world. That'd be fireworks. So
for sure,
that was that match. It was awesome. Go back and watch that match. It's just, again, the passing is phenomenal. Let's talk about lack of passing. Jonathan Alves defeats Mateus Luna via decision. It was judge's decision. It was 10-10, 10 points for each. This was the match that everyone hates for IBJJF, which is 50-50, lapel 50-50 or 50-50, and the teeter-totter sweep. And they fixed it kind of, and they've slowly sort of fixed the rule for IBJJF where you actually have to come all the way up and tech all the way up now for the sweep to count.
Yeah.
But Jonathan Alves really likes to play the margins, and Mateus Luna, again, was willing to play it with Alves. It was a back-and-forth tech-up where the first guy to leave 50-50 loses. Neither guy left 50-50. And then Meregali went off on... We didn't went off. Just was like... Meregali is pretty... If you listen to Meregali, and you've watched him for a couple of years, he's pretty outspoken when it comes to his feelings on the IBJJF. As a top-level competitor, most of the guys don't kind of ruffle feathers. Meregali's one of the few top-level guys that will actually kind of go nah, I don't really like how the IBJJF does things, and here's why. Which takes some gall for, being a world title and world champion in your prime, going into that organization and, online, having, criticism of them. And he made a post that was basically this is why 50-50 is terrible. I almost put on my gi to show these guys how to do it. And it was just a very funny post with Meregali being basically these are bad rules because you don't because we get matches like this and no one's subbing each other. Right.
And then it seemed like I don't know, in the post it seemed very much like he was combating the rules, that the rules need to change.
Yeah.
But then it also the imagery he used was of this match, so it's ooh.
And then the follow-up post. So apparently, I actually didn't see the response, but I saw.
You haven't? Okay.
I saw Meregali's response. I didn't see Guillermo's response from AOJ.
Yeah. So Guy from AOJ basically he responded pretty politely, I think, considering. Can't remember the word he used exactly. It was a pretty politically consistent response, basically saying don't poo-poo on athletes, you're better than that, if you you can build yourself up, you can build a brand without bashing someone else.
Right.
And then
Meregali went, I wasn't bashing anyone. Let me show you who I'm a bash. And he basically goes through Guy's entire black belt record and basically goes, you don't sub good people. I sub good people, and Hodger subbed good people. You're boring. Yeah. And it was just Jesus.
That's pretty much the crux of what he said. And then Guy did respond, and he basically was pretty ingratiating. He said, yeah, man, I never said I was a better competitor than you. A lot of my jiu-jitsu stock is coming from being able to coach and train other people to become world champions, which he's done, obviously. And, his brother was more of the competitor. But still, he even said, even not being a top-level competitor, I've won 4 world titles. He's I'm not as good a competitor as you, but I've won 4 world titles, so I'm still pretty good. And then
which is such like a low. It's such a that's a flex. Like that is just like God. I'm still I'm just gonna you. I still won four titles, like 4. Like
you can't. I mean, you can't get mad at that. Like,
no, you can't. I mean,
you could say yeah, he wasn't as exciting, but he still won.
They're all phenomenal
winning
competitors.
Is your goal? Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So
we're
again,
talking about like the cream of the crop here.
Yeah, I mean some of the best to ever put on a gi or take off a gi and grapple with another human, like absolutely. So again, I typically don't like to go into too much drama on the show because it's just not. Yeah. It's not my. I don't really enjoy it too much, but for stuff like this, I just think it's really funny because Meregali is like. He's coming into the forefront in no-gi, doing very well at ADCC, and like being one of the few guys that is kind of vocally outspoken about his thoughts on the IBJJF rule set. And he kind of echoes, I think, of what, at least internally on the show, a lot of us have talked about for years, on and off the air, for like, man, the IBJJF has a lot of rules. It is one of the hardest organizations to watch for excitement, for grappling. Like, they have a specific rule set involved that is position first, right. But it lets you stall, it lets you play the edge, it lets you sit in positions that are non-productive, it lets there's a lot of big problems with the organization, and athletes at the top level, in it being the most or one of the most prestigious organizations in the gi, figure out, hey, this is what the rule says, this is how I need to play because I want to win. And again, I never begrudge athletes for winning in the way that they need to win because, like, end of the day, like Kynan said it best at, versus Craig Jones at ADCC. He's getting booed. He goes, look, man, I have a career. Like, Craig's a tough guy. All these guys at the top level are amazing practitioners and athletes, and, like, everyone wants to win. So if the rules are going to let me win in this way, like, I'm going to win in this way. If you want that changed, advocate for changes in the rules. And the IBJJF, again...
Wins are the way that athletes make money, regardless of how they win. Because nobody cares 15 years from now if you won 3 world titles. No one thinks about how you won each of the 3. They think about how many world titles you've had.
Unless you're Hodger.
So, like,
everyone fucking remembers that he subbed everyone from X-Choke from Mount. Like,
right. But, like, if I asked you, how many points did Bernardo, I mean, maybe not you because you're a freak, but, like, how did Bernardo Faria win his first world title against who and by how many points? Like, most people won't know, but you can remember, like, in 2010 he won a world title. Or it's like, and Anderson Silva kind of parroted this towards the end of his career too, when he had that match with Damian Maia. And it was pretty much a snooze fest. He didn't want to go to the ground. Damian Maia didn't want to stand in the strike, so it kind of got boring.
So we were talking about that match last night. We talked about that match last time, and I when we watched the Jake Paul versus Anderson Silva fight this weekend. Really? We talked about that match, and so Simon on the show, he's never actually been on the show, but he's been a writing correspondent for the show and done a lot of work on the behind the scenes. That dude can list, if you say like a UFC, he can give you like the number it was and like where it was and what year it was. He's like, oh yeah, that was this one, that was 32, that was this headliner, and that was in New Jersey. And so, like that is a game that we've played for years, and like we talked about that with the Abu Dhabi fight for Damian Maia and Anderson Silva. Just kind of we're towards the end of the show now.
Yeah,
but
so I don't know. The point that he was making is basically, if you're a world champion, people remember you. But the minute you lose, people say like, oh, he wasn't ever that good, blah, blah, blah. So like you have to kind of do what you need to do to win. And then maybe your match after that can be exciting. But winning definitely comes first.
Yeah. And I understand. That's why we are on the show, like always make a point to like highlight it's not necessarily the athlete's problem. Again, there are athletes that I definitely prefer to watch over others because they are more exciting in a role. Like Tyne Dowpra. Like I'm going to watch that guy's matches regardless. Gary Tonin. I'm going to watch that. Gordon Ryan. I'm going to watch those guys' matches regardless of rule set because they're going to go put on a banger match usually 90+% of the time. It's just the IBJJF has been glacial in its changing of the rules, and I think they are picking up the pace, especially with the inclusion of heel hooks, and I think a lot of other things are shifting in the community with how the game is played and like what modern top-level grappling looks like, and I think the IBJJF will continue to make larger changes to stay consistent with what the top level of jiu-jitsu looks like, regardless of like the history and the changes that they've made or lack of change they've made. I think
the last 50-50 rule change was made. It was like 2015, and that was that.
Something like that.
It's definitely 2015. I remember.
Okay.
It's like
you have to intend to come up.
Well, they no longer gave. That was the rule where they no longer gave you an ad for a sweep that starts and ends at 50-50.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know. Maybe they need to change it to. And this is just
they changed the rule
spitballing.
again a couple of years ago because we were doing the show
Oh,
and we
really?
talked about it, and it was in this house. It was basically they changed they worded like intention, where it's like you actually have to like tack up now with the leg to get the sweep. You can't just like be up and like sitting. Like you actually have to be up now.
I think it has to go past that where like you have to disengage 50-50, like clear your like there should be some. You have to write it very specifically.
Yeah.
But there has to be like a way that you have to clear your legs from 50-50 for it to be a sweep as well, which I think that can maybe change the game in terms of how that 50-50 sweep is played. But until I can think of a better way to do it.
You know what'll fix it real quick? Heel hooks in the gi.
Maybe.
Just saying.
I don't know.
Fixes that
or maybe
problem.
reaping but not heel hooks. I don't know. Something.
Just add them both. Like, hey, this is grappling, man. This is what it looks like at the high level. These guys are world class and black belts competing in IBJJF. Heel hooks are a thing you can do. Let's stop playing pretend that they don't exist. You know, because we're in the gi and I can't touch your leg this way. So, yeah. So again, 50-50, and so back to not to begrudge this point and continue it. There's an interesting thing, and it's in a fighting game I watched called Super Smash Bros. Melee. There's a guy named Hungrybox. He plays a character typically that's kind of like he plays it in a way that for years was people were saying he was killing Melee, killing the game because it was like so boring to watch because he would play off the edge. And he's played some guys again in Plup. Basically, he's like, the way to beat him is to play in this boring way, but no one's going to want to see this tournament if I play that way. So I have to find a way to beat him that is not playing in this way because people will hate me for it. And like, I have to play the game in a way that will continue to support the audience watching and paying us to do these things. And it was just a really interesting parallel for this 50-50 rule and his recent interview about like how he had to play against Plup. So. Yeah,
that's the meta for any sport as it's growing.
Yeah. So you got to keep it exciting enough that we want to watch it while also still winning. So I think IBJJF struggles to find a balance with that. So that was the GP. Again, very happy they've included women. Finally, it's awesome that, you know, they are up on the same stage as the men. We've championed that for years, so it's, you know, it's great for that to come to fruition. Moving on to the preview section. What do you want to preview first, Austin? We don't have a lot. We don't have any brackets for anything, so I'm going to list some names, talk about some stuff I'm excited about, but we don't have any brackets, so we're not going to do super in-depth previews today. What are you going to do first?
Let's go Emerald City first.
Emerald City. This is a hell of a tournament, absolute EBI tournament. Some names have changed here, so I think we have the most updated list. We have Kyle Bain, Andrew Tackett, Devontae Johnson, Big Dan Manasuri, Pat Shangoli, Max Cote, and Franco Pano. Dude, Pat Shangoli that was kind of news this week. Everyone watched that heel hook last week on EBI and then watched his heel hooks and finishes in the qualifier. And then people pulled a bunch of footage of him heel hooking people in like local competitions and went, oh, this guy does this all the time. And
that's kind of what he does.
Ooh, he does not give you a chance to tap. And so it again, not really my place to care.
Yeah. It rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, but I think as a full-time athlete and competitor, especially at the pro level, I kind of don't care as much.
Especially in a pro tournament, I don't. And this is where we stand very much on like the entertainment broadcast side, where it's like guys paid tournament. There is never a rule for how fast you cannot or can take a submission. So, you know, because there's no rule against it, it's up to you. And at these levels, you know, the smallest margin, you know, sometimes determines if you get paid or not. So I can't really fault him. I wouldn't want it to happen to my leg, but it's also why I don't enter in high-level $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 tournaments, because I know that these kind of guys are out there and they're, you know, my safety is not of his priority and not on his radar. And in the same way that a lot of these competitors, like, it's not my job to determine how safe you are. If you want to tap and you want to quit, you're good to do that. But I'm gonna break this as quickly as I am able to. So, but again, that's been a really interesting development this week, as he has rubbed. It seems like a lot of the community has really. That's new ground for a lot of the community, and you know we'll see how he fares in Emerald City. Kid is 16, extremely talented. Potentially going to see the match with Kyle Bain, but he's got some tough dudes to go to in this one. So we saw Kyle last week on EBI.
This is definitely a big step up in competition for him.
Yeah, we saw Kyle Bain last week in EBI. We also saw Pat last week in EBI. Both guys. Pat made it to the second round and got stalled out in overtime, and Kyle made it to the finals and got Rina got choked by Nicky Rod in overtime. This is, again, another EBI-style rules tournament. It will all depend on the bracketing. I'd assume you would put Shangoli and Bame being on the same team, opposite sides, but given their seeding, with Bame probably being the 1 seed here, especially with that performance last week, and Shangoli not making it all the way, it'd be kind of hard to say. Andrew Tackett is going to be significantly undersized, but he has beat Big Dan before. Yep. So that's interesting. So it's like, I assume they would put those guys on opposite sides, because you wouldn't want to have a rematch between those two guys because they met on Who's Next. And that was about a little less than a year ago, I think, right? That was filmed in like February, I think, is what we determined it was.
Yep.
So that's an interesting rematch. Devontae Johnson, Andrew Tackett, Shani DeMarco. This is going to be an interesting one. Again, I wouldn't surprise me to see all these guys, all of these guys have a pathway to victory, which is kind of what makes Emerald City really, really exciting. It's a smaller bracket, so you're only going to have a round. You start with your round of 8. Kyle is super hard to beat in EBI rules.
Yeah, I would imagine he's the heavy favorite to win.
Yeah.
But not so far in a way that you couldn't see anybody else winning, just that, I don't know, on paper, he looks like the heavy favorite.
Yeah, Big Dan's up there too, but again, it's kind of curious to see what it was look like after ADCC. He's been very rapidly making improvements, and he kind of, especially as an absolute, his game is tailor-made to beat bigger guys. So guys like Kyle, guys like Shangoli, guys like Devontae, all kind of on the bigger side. Kind of very curious to see how he deals with those guys. So, and then also, Kote and Kote and Franco Pana are also in here as well. Guys that can definitely in the mix and can throw a wrench into anyone's day, especially under the EBI rule set.
Yep.
I don't know if they have the Maluap rule or not in this tournament. That may be a finishers only thing, but I've talked about it every time. I would love to see that rule put into all EBI tournaments. So if you don't put up any offense during the regulation, you don't get to go to overtime. I think that's a really good rule, and that kind of moves it in the correct direction for being, less of the stuff we don't like to see, whereas a guy gets dominated and then gifted a position and wins.
Right.
But again, all part of the rule set. You compete in it. That's what you're signing up for. So, again, should be super excited. I was gonna go to this live, but I'm doing commentary actually for Copa Virginia on my shirt this weekend down south in Virginia.
Oh, nice.
So I'm not gonna be able to make it up to this one. Next one. What do you want to do?
Let's go with Midwest finishers.
Midwest finishers. So this is a 3v3 v3 battle scenario. That tournament, we're not going to preview that tournament until that comes out because there's no bracketing and it would be very, very hard to preview. There are a couple of super fights on this one, and there's one of them that I'm super excited about.
Yeah, the main event, Jeremy Skinner versus Max Hansen. That's going to be a banger. I think that's a really cool matchup.
Yeah, Skinner's looked really, really good. He's been at B team for a bit now, and looked good in ADCC. Hansen's a tough dude. Skinner is going to be hard to beat though. So I think Skinner comes in here as the favorite, but Hansen is a guy, again, been rapidly making improvements, been on that level for a little bit. Wouldn't surprise me to have this be a tough match for Skinner, but I do want to lean Skinner here just with seeing behind the scenes of his training camp for ADCC has made me kind of biased. And I'm like, that dude is looking phenomenal as of recently.
Yeah, it's probably a safe bet.
Yeah. So they also have the bracket for finishers as well. And so that should be fun this week. We also have upcoming this week, Fight to Win 213. We don't have a card for that yet. Again, wish Seth all the well with getting the trailers back from, the issue that they had last week. Hope that is able to happen. But we also have, always get the name wrong, Submission Only Series, because the logo looks like Submission on the Shore. Submission Only Series VIII is happening again. This one is a middleweight bracket, and tons of names on here. This is going to be real interesting. We got Andy Varela, we got Gabriel Almeida, we got Ryan Aiken, we got Chris Wojak, we got Stefan Martinez, we got Mike Crisp, we got Miha Plejevic, we got Bobby Whitner, Max Cox, and Kevin Crane. Kevin Crane, I think, just won or took silver at the UWW. He just took the ADCC Open silver medal versus Andrew Tackett. Like, Kevin Crane is a dude, again, antics aside, that dude can grapple and puts up whenever he's on. He's going to be really hard to beat. I actually watched his matches, and I think I judged a couple of his matches at the ADCC Open. We've talked about him for years, but like seeing him live, it's he's a tough dude to beat. But you also have Varela in this.
Yeah. And
I think those are the two guys potentially we get up in the finals here. Varela looked, phenomenal. This is going to be a fun one. I love the camera work for Submission Only Series. They usually have a camera like right next to the mat. And it's like a floating flying camera, kind of like Royal Jiu-Jitsu in Korea does it. And I really, really like how it's done. It also has the infinity wall in the back, so it just generally looks like a really, really clean event. And I just love how it looks on the mats. So that's on November 6th. And I think that does it. Anything else for this week?
I don't think so.
Awesome. So what's your week look like other than getting better?
That's pretty much it. I'm going to try to, hopefully get back on the mats early this week as opposed to later, but that's not going to be dependent on health, really.
Yeah. So that's good. Starting a new job tomorrow for me. So that will be fun, and the stress that all comes with that. Monday morning's going to come super early, and I have a commute now for the first time in a while, which I'm not amped about. But, it is what it is. Changes. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah, man. More money, more problems.
More money, more problems. That's the change. So I'm not too upset about it, but it's still like big changes. So miss working remote as much as I was prior. But that's all that we got going on. Really been training a ton. Hoping to compete locally some more coming up. Really enjoyed doing that a couple of weeks ago, and looking forward to doing commentary at Copa Virginia this weekend. That should be awesome. Miranda and I are going down there doing that. That's always fun. Super curious. I don't have a bracket yet, but super curious if we're going to see Gavin or DeAndre Corbray in this bracket, because historically Gavin's entered I think 2 or 3 of those that we've done commentary for Grappling Rewind for Copa Virginia, and has cleaned up. And so usually it's like, and I think now that Copa Virginia is kind of expanding more into Copa Elite and some of the other stuff they're doing, I think these tournaments are only going to get more and more stacked. If you want to hear us commentate, those videos come out on YouTube, on the Copa Virginia YouTube page, and it's Virginia has a huge level of talent. Again, 3 people from Standard Jiu-Jitsu, we talked about them last week, won Nogi Pan's adult titles. The Maryland DMV scene has some really phenomenal grapplers, and so it's awesome to be able to do commentary for an organization like Copa Virginia that showcases and has paid cash prizes locally for grapplers like that. That again gives us an insight and gives us to watch these guys come up, like we watched both Corbrays come up locally. So I think that's it. That's all I got.
That's all I got too, dude.
All right. As always in the show, I'm your host, Mange, my co-host,
Austin.
And we are the Grappling Rewind. You see on the mat. Whatever it is, stay safe. If you like the show, please consider sharing it on Facebook with the folks at your gym. It's the best way that we grow the show, and we really appreciate it. You can reach out to us on email.
We also have Instagram. We have Facebook. We have Twitter. We have Google+.
Until that shuts down.
We have a website.
If you have an event you would like to have us cover, please let us know. If you have a name, like most people do, and you'd like to have us stop butchering it,
let us know.
Reach out to us. The show is also available on YouTube, Spotify, in addition to iTunes and every other podcast service. We very much appreciate your time, and thank you.